The Dershow.
And I remember certainly when I was at Harvard, you were a constant presence at Chabad, Jewish student events.
I helped found Chabad at Harvard. We founded it, Ruth Weiss and I and a few others,
Yeah. So just sort of, what do you make of sort of your religious belief, your background, your training, how it kind of has affected, your thinking, your career? Has it changed over time?
Well, I don't have any religious belief. I don't have any beliefs. I'm an empiricist. I look at facts. I look at data. I don't believe in things. I don't believe in the First Amendment. What I do is look at countries that have had freedom of speech and countries that hadn't. I look at Churchill when he says democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others that have been tried over time. So I am the ultimate empiricist. So I'm not a believer. I'm not a believer in anything. I was recently asked to write an article for a book that's called Elevator Pitches for God. And it has 100 prominent authors, each making a one-page elevator pitch for why God exists. And I said, you're asking the wrong person. I'll tell you what I will do for you. I will do a one-page pitch for why you can't prove that God doesn't exist. And I did that. And my ultimate proof, and the reason that I will always be an agnostic, is that I can't believe something came from nothing. Even the Big Bang Theory starts with something. Evolution starts with something. I can get that. I get evolution. I get Big Bang. I don't believe in the Big Bang. I think it's just a variation of the book of Genesis. But I do think that even any of those theories, you have to ask yourself, you can't say turtles all the way down. You got to start with something. And I don't, until science gives me the answer to that, I'll always be an agnostic. But my Judaism is not based on theology. The most uninfluential, great, brilliant scholar of Jewish life is the Rambam, Maimonides. I went to Professor Twersky's class on Rambam at Harvard, and I was always the dissenter in the back row. Rambam was like Larry Tribe, very smart but wrong about everything. And why was Rambam wrong about everything? First, he said, we don't need interpretations, we don't need pilpul, we don't need Talmud, we don't need any of that. The Torah is simple. It has one meaning, one interpretation, and I know what it is, and so I'll write the Mishnah Torah. And, he's right about a lot of things, but it's so arrogant. And then he says, you know what? I'm not going to let only the Catholics have a catechism. I'm going to have a catechism. And so he wrote the Jewish Catechism, and we sing it every Shabbos. We sing it, I believe, Ani Ma'amin Be'emunah Shlema B'Viat HaMashiach. 13 principles, and if you disagree with any of the 13 principles, you're like a weed. Well, I'm like 9 for 13. And Jews don't want a catechism. Jews want to argue and debate. And Rambam was just wrong about that. And so, my Jewishness is a Jewishness of argumentation. It's cultural. I go to shul. I love davening. I love chazonim. My grandfathers were both chazonim. I can sing some good chazonish music. I'm not going to do it for you, but I'll keep my day job. But I love cantorial music. I wrote an opera about a cantor. It's Gerson Sirota, who was given the choice during the Warsaw Ghetto situation of leaving and coming to America and singing the Metropolitan Opera, but not saving his family and his people, or staying and dying with his people. That's the theme of the opera. And he stays with his people and dies in the Shoah. And so I'm a deeply committed Jew, but like many, many other deeply committed Jews, I'm not a theological Jew. Herzl was not a theological Jew. Ben-Gurion was not a theological Jew. Rabin was not a theological Jew. Moshe Dayan was not a theological Jew. So I had a big fight one day with Shimon Peres, who was a dear friend of mine. I was the only outsider invited when he got his White House medal. That was when I was talking to Barack Obama. And so he gets up and makes a speech, and he says, don't ever ask a Jew who their grandparents were to judge whether they're a Jew. No. Ask him, don't ask whether his grandparents were Jewish. Ask whether his grandchildren will be Jewish. And I said, that's the most obnoxious thing I've ever heard. Herzl's grandchildren were not Jewish. Many of the great Jewish leaders, you can't control your children. We can't control our grandparents. We can't control our children. And the idea of judging a Jew by whether his child marries a non-Jew or his grandchild marries a non-Jew is just wrong. And we had this big fight about that. And I said, it's so easy if you live in Israel to marry a Jew. It's great. I tell all my friends, they say, how do we make sure our children marry Jews? Easy, two things. Move to Bnei Brak in Israel, or move to Borough Park. And then they won't meet anybody who's not Jewish. But if you send your kid to Harvard, it's, 20% chance he's going to meet and marry somebody brilliant, fantastic, beautiful, great, who's not Jewish. That's just the choices we make. Propinquity is the most important predictor of marriage.